It's been some 60 years since George Orwell wrote what's been called a political satire, his novel 1984. But I think it's more in league with political prophecy, very accurate prophecy. In fact, Orwell says in the book, one of the lines in the book is that if you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever, which we see happening around the world. What Orwell prophesies is a global society. And we have to remember this book was written in the mid-1940s and was published in 1948 and 1949, was a global society where there was total surveillance, where a figure called Big Brother, which was the government, was watching you constantly. In fact, there were posters everywhere which says Big Brother is watching you. But key to Orwell's story is a deeply personal one. Basically a clerk, a man who was a member of the outer party, named Winston Smith, falls in love with a girl named Julia, and they start what's termed an illegal love affair, which means that they go off, have sex, and make love and have conversations outside the purview of the state. But there are snitches, and there are surveillance cameras everywhere, and eventually Winston and Julia are caught and they're put through reprogramming. Much of what Orwell discusses in this book, and like I say, I think it's prophecy, is that surveillance cameras would be everywhere. We see that happening today. We have learned now that our government listens in on our telephone calls, they read our emails. In fact, the president now says he can read our regular mail if he wants to. Hate crime legislation now is a vogue in our society. Many states have them, and the government has a federal hate crime law. It punishes thought, much like the thought crime was punished in Orwell's novel. Americans are non-readers, they're no longer analytical. And most Americans are television somnambulists. They watch television, that's where they get most of their information. And as we know, television is a dumbed down medium which provides very little information upon which to make decisions. But we've been warned about this for years in novels, short stories, and films. But I probably think that film is the most accessible place to find what the vision of the future may be. And there's some very fine films on the subject, and I want to talk about my favorites and focus on a few of those. THX 1138. It was made in 1970. It was George Lucas's directorial debut, and it concerns a future state where the police are in total control, and they keep the people, the citizens in line with what they call pain prods, which are electric shock instruments. And it was really a foretelling of what we know today as tasers. Blade Runner, 1982, and this is a masterpiece film by Ridley Scott. When this movie was made, it didn't do well in the theaters. It was routinely panned by a lot of critics. It was thought to be too violent, too far out. And today it's really a cult favorite and considered now a great film. And it is a great film. What it portrays is a future totally controlled by the government, which is wedded very closely to the mega corporations. And the mega corporation that's the main focus of this film is the Tyrell Corporation, a genetic engineering firm which has made what are called replicants, which are artificial human beings. What these replicants do is they do the type of work on off-worlds and other places where humans don't do that kind of work anymore, such as mining or whatever it might be. And Harrison Ford plays a policeman in the film, and his job is to retire renegade replicants. And what this movie really centers on is what does it mean to be human? If we create artificial beings, which in the near future is a real possibility, and some people actually think that we've actually cloned and created some artificial life forms that can really think on its own, may not be quite human. What is our duty to that entity? Can we just wipe them out because we think we created them? Are we playing God? 1984, which was released in 1984, is the best adaptation of Orwell's dark tale. The performances in this movie are what you want to watch. John Hurt is excellent as Winston Smith, and Richard Burton is superb as O'Brien, the fellow who tortures Winston Smith when he goes through the deprogramming process. Finally, there are 3 films that were made in 2006 that all the same year, which are some of the finest portrayals of what I think what we would call Orwell cinema, and in some ways very accurately predict what's going to happen in the future. The first is V for Vendetta. V is a terrorist rebel whose goal is to somehow resist, rebel, cause a revolution against a state which is very Orwellian and controls everything. V is a terrorist, so the solution to the problems for V are blowing up buildings and creating mayhem and violence. This accurately portrays the terrorism we've experienced in this country and what is happening around the world. Children of Men was also made in 2006. The year is 2027, and you have a world that seems to be quite chaotic. Martial law has been imposed. You have a very strong government, but humanity has lost hope because it can no longer procreate. Clive Owen, in a very fine performance, is a government worker who ends up, incredibly so, protecting a woman who is pregnant. And so all of a sudden there's hope for the human race, and he's trying to make sure she's not either killed or knocked off or kidnapped by terrorists or whatever. And what this film shows is that if we aren't careful with what we're seeing in the world today, with all the chemicals in the air and what we see with global warming and the genetic tinkering of the government and mega corporations, we could very well end up in a world where we are sterile and where there is very little hope for procreation, or we're producing mutants. The importance of this film is its philosophy, and the hope for the future is in people. We live in a very anti-human environment often in the world today, even in the United States. We're seen as consumers. We're seen as objects to be manipulated by our own government. What this film really portrays is there is a form of hope, but you won't find it in government control. You won't find it on the tube. You won't find it in martial law. You'll find it in people. Land of the Blind was also made in 2006. I think it's one of the finest films I've seen in years. When it was first screened, it caused quite a furor because people on the left and people on the right that thought basically booed the film because it was perceived that the director here and the writer were attacking every side. This film is based on a series of historical incidences and dictators who have ruled ruthlessly. The dictator in this film is Maximilian, who spends most of his time either oppressing the people, his subordinates, and running the movie industry for his country. Donald Sutherland is a playwright who is put into prison because he's seen as subversive by the government. Ralph Fiennes plays a prison guard who starts a dialogue with Thorne in the prison and is eventually convinced that Thorne should not be in prison for what he has done. What this movie really stands for is any type of leadership that does not promote what we believe in America as constitutional freedoms, equal protection, free speech, is not controlled under law, is not controlled under rule of law, will become dangerous, will become totalitarian. Orwell's novel concludes with Winston Smith being taken to programming at the Ministry of Love. The reprogramming of Winston is deemed successful when he eventually is forced to write, and really believes this, that 2 + 2 = 5. He loses his feelings for Julia and he sees the new reality of the state. And Orwell's novel ends with this one sentence, most profound sentence about Winston. It says, "He loved Big Brother." I hope and pray this is not an epitaph for our times.